So this guy, my dad. He'd been acting weird for weeks, like he was walking on eggshells around the whole house. My mom just kept saying he was stressed about work, you know how it is, but it felt bigger. Like a storm cloud that wouldn't move. He'd flinch when the phone rang, jump at his own shadow. One evening, I found him in the garage, late, fiddling with a padlock on an old trunk. He slammed it shut when he heard me, like I'd caught him stealing state secrets. "What are you doing?" I asked. He just shook his head, his eyes darting around like he expected someone to jump out from behind the lawnmower. "Nothing, Sawyer. Just tidying up." Mind you, this was the same man who once tried to assemble IKEA furniture with a hammer and a prayer. And tidying up wasn't exactly his strong suit. The whole thing was so bizarre, I just stood there for a minute, watching him. He had this greasy smudge on his forehead. He went back to fiddling with the lock, muttering under his breath. I swear I heard him say something about the ledger and ruin. Ruin? My dad? He was the most stable person I knew, always so predictable. Like a well-oiled cog in a machine. I remember one time, he spent 3 hours color-coding our entire spice rack. For him, chaos was a misplaced cinnamon stick. So this whole clandestine trunk operation felt like it belonged in a spy novel, not our beige-carpeted suburban life. Then he looked up, and there was this raw panic in his eyes. "You didn't see anything, Sawyer. You understand?" His voice was raspy, like he'd been shouting for hours. And that was it. He zipped the trunk shut, then practically bolted. It was unnerving. A few days later, things escalated. My dad was supposed to be at A. He owns a huge chunk of it, actually, but he never made a big deal out of it. Let everyone else think they were in charge. Anyway, he never showed. His phone went straight to voicemail. My mom was frantic, calling everyone, but no one had heard from him. I was at work, trying to focus on the air in my office, usually smelling faintly. It was Thursday. Or maybe Friday. I can never keep those days straight when things get hairy. Then, a guy shows up at my office. And he was, but rumpled, like he'd slept in it. He didn't say his name, just asked if I was Sawyer. I nodded, my stomach doing this weird lurch. "We need to talk about your father," he said. And that's when he laid it all out. Apparently, my dad hadn't just been stressed about work. He'd been hiding something massive. A debt. A huge, soul-crushing debt. And not just any debt, but one that was about to bring the whole company down, and him with it. And it was tied to some shady deals from years ago, things I'd never even heard of. He'd been trying to fix it, to cover it up. But he'd dug himself into a hole so deep, he couldn't climb out. The trunk in the garage? It was. The ledger. This guy, he was calm, matter of fact. He explained that my dad had been missing for a few days, and they were trying to find him. He also explained that if things weren't resolved. He kept tapping his pen on my desk. I felt this weird urge to ask him if he wanted a glass of water. Even though he looked like he'd just run a marathon. "So, what do you want from me?" I asked. My voice sounded surprisingly steady. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Your father's share. It's the only thing that can save us. You're the majority shareholder, after all." Majority shareholder. Right. The thing I'd inherited and mostly ignored. The thing my dad had always managed, saying it was just for show. Apparently, the show was about to get real. I remember looking past him, out the window. There was a pigeon on the ledge, pecking at a discarded crumb. It seemed so unconcerned with the absolute dumpster. I felt this sudden, intense craving for a good pastrami sandwich. Like, right now. With extra mustard. You know how it is when something like this hits? Everything else just fades away. The reports on my desk, the deadlines, the petty office gossip, all of it became background noise. This one guy. This stranger was telling me that my father's secret life was about to blow up our entire world. And then, as he was detailing the financial, he looked down at his watch. I'm afraid I have to run. Another emergency. He stood up, adjusted his tie, and just left. No handshake, no offer of further assistance. Just gone. He left me with all this information, all this weight, and a half-finished explanation of how screwed we all were. I sat there for a long time. The pigeon was still on the ledge. The tapping of the pen was gone, replaced. I thought about my dad, that panic in his eyes, the greasy smudge. I thought about the trunk. And the ledger. And then I thought about that pastrami sandwich again. So yeah. That was it. Anyway, I never did get that sandwich. The phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice was tight, choked. Sawyer, they found him. And I just waited. Waited to hear what came next. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, like the air before a thunderclap. The call ended, and the silence that followed was a whole different kind of noise. It pressed in, filling the small office space. My mom had said they found him, and that was it. No details. No he's okay or he's in the hospital. Just the stark fact. Found. Like a misplaced set of keys. I pictured her, probably pacing the length of. I heard the faint, almost imperceptible creak of the floorboards beneath her feet, even though I was miles away. I needed to leave. Now. The quarterly reports blurred into an indistinguishable pile of numbers. The deadlines felt like ancient history. I grabbed my jacket, the worn leather cool against my hand. My colleague, Brenda from accounting, poked her head around the corner of my cubicle. She had a faint whiff of lavender hand lotion about her. Everything okay, Sawyer? You look a bit pale. I managed a nod. And yeah, Brenda, fine. Just a family thing. Need to head out. She gave me a, oh, of course. Take care. Her voice was all concerned, but her eyes held that little spark of office gossip. I swear, if she'd had a notepad, she. Mysterious visitor. Sawyer bolts. What's the scoop? I bypassed the usual office pleasantries, the forced smiles and the small talk about the weather. I just wanted to get to my car. The elevator door slid open with a soft hiss, and I stepped inside. The stale air inside the elevator always smelled vaguely of floor wax and regret. I pressed the button for the ground floor. I watched the numbers tick down, each one. As the elevator doors opened onto the lobby. I walked past the security desk, the guard. He had a faint scent of stale coffee about him. I almost went over and asked him if he'd seen my dad. But what would I even say? Hey, have you seen this guy? And he's got a greasy smudge on his forehead. I unlocked it, the familiar click echoing in the quiet parking garage. The interior smelled of old air freshener and I slid into the driver's seat, the leather a little warm from the sun. I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over with a low rumble, a sound that usually meant freedom, escape. Today, it felt off to something grim. I put the car in reverse, backing out of the spot. My tire screeched a little on the asphalt. I didn't care. I pulled out of the garage and onto the street. The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and honking horns. My mom's voice, tight and choked, replayed in my head. Sawyer, they found him. Found him. Where? How? Was he hurt? Was he gone? The possibilities swirled, each one worse than the last. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. And I could feel a dull ache starting in my jaw. I passed a familiar diner, the one with the neon sign that always flickered. I could almost smell the fried onions and the stale coffee. I'd been craving that pastrami sandwich earlier. Now, the thought of food made my stomach churn. I needed to get home. I needed to see my mom. I needed to know. I remember one time, Dad took me to this boring corporate retreat. All these guys in suits talking about and assets. And I was maybe 10. I got bored and wandered off. Found myself in the hotel's housekeeping closet. It smelled like bleach and laundry detergent. There was a mop bucket with some murky water in it. I remember staring at the water for a good 5 minutes, mesmerized by the little ripples. Then, one of the housekeepers, a woman with kind eyes and a faint accent, found me. She didn't scold me. She just offered me a cookie. It was a plain sugar cookie, nothing special. She didn't ask why I was there, just gave me the cookie and a little smile. She smelled faintly of ivory soap. I always thought of her when I smelled bleach. This entire situation, this whole mess, it felt. I took a left turn onto our street. The houses all looked the same, manicured lawns and quiet driveways. It was a picture of suburban normalcy, a stark contrast to the chaos that was unfolding inside our walls. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed. That meant she was home. And probably waiting. And I cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. I sat there for a moment, just breathing. The faint scent of freshly cut grass wafted. I could hear the distant, rhythmic squeak of a swing set from a neighbor's yard. I reached for the car door handle, my hand trembling slightly. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. My mom never locked it when she was home. I pushed it open, the familiar squeak of the house. Too quiet. The air inside smelled of lemon pledge and something else. Something I couldn't place. Anxiety? Fear? Mom? I called out, my voice sounding thin and reedy. No answer. I walked into the living room. It was tidy, as always. And the cushions on the sofa were perfectly arranged. A stack of magazines sat neatly on the coffee table. Nothing looked out of place, yet everything felt wrong. The silence was oppressive. I heard a faint sound from the kitchen. A clinking. Like dishes being moved. I walked towards the sound, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. My mom was standing at the counter, her back to me. She was holding a mug, her knuckles white as she gripped it. She turned around when she heard me approach. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her face was set in a kind of grim determination. "Sawyer," she said. Her voice was raspy, like she hadn't spoken in a while. "Mom, what's going on? What happened? Did they tell you anything?" She took a slow breath. "They found him. At the old warehouse down by the river. The one that's been empty for years." The warehouse. I'd passed it a million times. Always looked derelict. Smelled of damp concrete and pigeon droppings. "Is he?" I couldn't finish the question. She shook her head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "He's alive. They're taking him to the hospital. He's not good." She looked down at her mug, then back at me. "The police are here. They want to talk to you." The police. Right. Of course. This had gone from a weird family drama to a full-blown criminal investigation. I needed to call the dentist. My appointment was next Tuesday. Did I still want to go? Maybe I should reschedule. This was all too much. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where are they?" "In the study," she said. "They said they need to get a statement from you." About the trunk." The trunk. Of course. The greasy smudge, the padlock, the muttered words about ruin. It all clicked into place, a horrifying, ugly picture. I walked towards the study. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear low, gruff voices from inside. The air in the hallway felt thick, heavy, like trying to walk through water. I could smell faint traces of my dad's. I pushed the door open. 2 uniformed officers were sitting in my dad's armchair and the guest chair. They both looked tired. One of them had a notepad open. The other one just stared at me. Sawyer, the one with the notepad asked. His voice was flat. Yeah. That's me. We're Officers Miller and Davis, the other one said. And he didn't offer a hand. We're investigating the circumstances surrounding your father's disappearance. I stood in the doorway, unsure of what to do. My dad's study was usually my sanctuary, filled with the scent of old paper and leather-bound books. Now, it felt violated. The files on his desk, so organized, were slightly askew. A faint aroma of cheap coffee emanated from a half-empty mug. We understand you may have some information regarding a trunk in your garage, Officer Miller said, his gaze fixed on his notepad. I saw him with it, I admitted. And he was acting weird. Officer Davis leaned forward. Weird how, exactly? His voice was a low rumble. He was jumpy. And he slammed it shut when he saw me. Like I'd caught him doing something bad. He mumbled something about a ledger. And ruin. He said ruin. The officers exchanged a look. It was a subtle thing, a flicker of their eyes, but it spoke volumes. They knew something. Or they suspected something. Did you see what was inside the trunk? Davis asked. No. He wouldn't let me. He told me I didn't see anything. Miller scribbled furiously. And your father, how would you describe his general disposition? Was he prone to secretive behavior? Secretive? My dad? The man who color-coded his spice rack? No, I said, shaking my head. And he was the opposite. Predictable. Stable. I don't understand any of this. My voice cracked on the last word. Officer Davis sighed, a long, drawn-out sound. Your father, Sawyer, has been involved in some complicated financial dealings. It seems he was trying to rectify a situation. Rectify a situation. That was a nice way of saying he'd screwed up big time. The man who visited you at your office, Miller said, his eyes meeting mine. The one in the rumpled suit. Did he give you a name? No. He just said he needed to talk about my father. And then he told me about the debt. And the company. And my share. Your share, Davis repeated, his gaze sharp. He mentioned your share? Yeah. He said it was the only thing that could save them. That I was the majority shareholder. Miller closed his notepad with a snap. Thank you for your time, Sawyer. We may need to speak with you again. Try to remember anything else, no matter how small. They stood up. Officer Davis gave me a curt nod. Officer Miller just looked at me, his expression unreadable. They walked out of the study, leaving me alone in the room. The scent of my dad's cologne seemed stronger now, almost suffocating. I looked at the files on his desk. They were all business-related. Nothing that screamed shady deals or massive debt. Like his sock drawer. Always perfectly folded. And I walked back into the living room. My mom was sitting on the sofa, staring. She looked exhausted. They're going to ask me questions, I said, my voice sounding hollow. She nodded slowly. I know. They were asking me about the trunk. And if I knew anything about large sums. Your father. He was a good man, Sawyer. He made mistakes. I sat down next to her, the familiar floral pattern of the sofa feeling alien. And I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. The silence in the house was broken only by our breathing. Did you know about the debt, Mom? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She hesitated for a long moment. I suspected something was wrong. He was so on edge. But he wouldn't tell me. He said he was protecting me. She let out a shaky breath. He was always trying to protect us. Protect us. By gambling away the family fortune? And by getting involved in God knows what? It didn't make sense. He was the anchor. The solid ground. I looked out the window. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. The neighbor's swing set was still squeaking, a monotonous, almost maddening sound. I thought about that pigeon on my office ledge, pecking at its crumb, unconcerned. It was a simpler existence. I remembered my dad teaching me how to ride a bike. And he'd held on to the back of the seat, running alongside me, his hand a steady presence. Just pedal, Sawyer, he'd shouted, his voice. Keep looking ahead. But right now, looking ahead felt impossible. All I could see was the wreckage. I needed to get out of the house for a bit. Just a few minutes. I stood up. I'm going for a walk, I said. My mom just nodded, her gaze still fixed on the blank television screen. I opened the front door and stepped out. And the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine hung in the air. I started walking, not heading anywhere in particular. Just putting distance between myself and the suffocating atmosphere of the house. I walked past familiar houses, past gardens with carefully tended rose bushes. I heard the distant bark of a dog. A car drove by, its headlights sweeping across my face. I didn't wave. I just kept walking. I found myself at the end of our street, where it met the main road. The traffic was heavier here, a constant stream of headlights and taillights. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and something vaguely metallic. I stood there for a while, just watching the cars go by. Each one a little bubble of life, heading somewhere. I thought about the man in the rumpled suit. He'd just dropped this bomb and then vanished. No follow-up. No offer of help. Just gone. Leaving me with the mess. It was like he was a character in a bad movie, delivering exposition and then exiting stage left. And my dad? He was the star of this disaster. I remembered one time, we were at the beach, and I'd built this elaborate sandcastle. It had turrets and a moat and little seashell decorations. I was so proud of it. Then, a rogue wave came and washed it all away. I'd cried. My dad had just put his arm around me. It's just sand, Sawyer, he'd said. We can build another one. But this wasn't sand. And this was everything. I turned around and started walking back home. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows. The squeaking swing set was still going. It was an unsettling soundtrack to the unfolding drama. As I approached my house, I saw that the lights were on in the study. The police were still there. I sighed. This was going to be a long night. A very long night. I pushed the front door open again. The house was still quiet, but the presence. My mom was still on the sofa, a small, hunched figure. They're still there, I said, stating the obvious. She nodded. They said they're going to be here for a while. I walked into the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator. The light spilled out, illuminating rows of neatly arranged food. It all looked so normal. So mundane. I grabbed a bottle of water and closed the door. The clinking of the glass bottle against the. I needed to sit down. I went back into the living room and sat in the armchair opposite my mom. It was a different chair from my dad's. Less worn. Less. Him. What happens now? I asked. My mom looked at me, her eyes vacant. I don't know, Sawyer. I just. Don't know. The squeaking of the. It was a childish sound, out of place in the midst of all this adult mess. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out. I thought about the trunk again. The padlock. The greasy smudge on my dad's forehead. He'd looked so defeated. Like all the color had been drained from him. It was a look I'd never seen on his face before. He was always so robust. So present. I remembered a time when I was a kid, and I'd lost my favorite toy car. A little red fire engine. I'd searched everywhere. My dad had helped me. We'd turned the house upside down. Eventually, he'd found it tucked away in the back of my toy box. He'd handed it to me with this big grin. "See? Always look in the most obvious place," he'd said. But this felt off where nothing could be found. Only lost. The silence in the room stretched, thick and heavy. I could hear the distant wail of a siren. It beat getting closer. Or maybe it was just my imagination. The world outside felt like it was closing in. I looked at my mom. She was still staring at the blank television screen. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. I wanted to say something, anything, to comfort her. But the words wouldn't come. I got up and walked to the window. The flashing lights of the police cars cast an eerie glow on the front lawn. I could see Officer Miller and Officer Davis standing by their car, talking. They looked like figures from another planet, their uniforms stark against the twilight. I thought about the man from the office. He'd said, "Your father's share. It's the only thing that can save us." My share. The thing I'd inherited and mostly ignored. And the thing my dad had always managed, saying it was just for show. Apparently, the show was about to get real. I turned away from the window and walked back towards the study. The low murmur of voices was still coming from inside. I hesitated at the door. I didn't want to go back in there. I didn't want to answer any more questions. But I had to. This was my father's mess, and now, somehow, it was mine too. I took a deep breath, the scent of lemon pledge and antiseptic filling my lungs. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The officers looked up. Officer Miller gestured to the chair. "Sawyer," he said, his voice as flat as ever. "We need to go over a few more things." I sat down. The worn leather of the chair cooled beneath me. I could hear the faint, rhythmic ticking of it beat counting down to something. Something I wasn't ready for. I just waited to hear what came next. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, like the air before a thunderclap.